I flushed your prescription antidepressants down the toilet. You don't need pills, you need to man up, my girlfriend said while I was holding the empty bottle. I set it down, called my doctor, and let her document everything from that moment forward. When my girlfriend saw her own mental health post sitting beside the medical file, she went quiet and couldn't finish her sentence. She stood in the kitchen doorway with the expression of someone who had just done something generous. She looked at me and said, I flushed your prescription antidepressants down the toilet. You don't need pills, you need to man up. I had gotten so good at hiding my bad days from her that I forgot she was supposed to be the one person I didn't have to hide them from. I stood there holding the empty pill bottle, the one that had been full 2 days before, and something inside me went very quiet. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know what to say. The quiet of someone who has just started counting. By the time you're reading this, the police report has already been filed, but that's where this ends. Here's where it started. My name is Yancey Adams. I'm 33 years old, a systems engineer at a mid-sized logistics company, and I have been on sertraline for 5 years. I was diagnosed with clinical depression at 28, and the way I managed it was the same way I managed any complicated system. Consistent inputs, regular monitoring, no improvisation. My prescription was 100 milligrams a day. The bottle lived on the kitchen shelf next to the coffee maker, and my phone alarm went off at 8 o'clock every evening. Haley Carver and I had been together for 2 years. She taught second grade at Westbrook Elementary and ran an Instagram wellness account she called a passion project, clean eating content, morning routine posts, and pieces about what she described as natural approaches to mental health. She had around 12,000 followers and checked the numbers the way some people check the weather. She was not a bad person. I want to be precise about that, because the distinction matters for what comes next. She was a person who had decided she knew things she did not actually know. The first sign came about 6 months before everything fell apart. I mentioned that my doctor was considering a small dose adjustment, and Haley set down her fork and said, maybe you should try exercising more first before adding anything. I didn't respond. I noted it. The second sign was 3 months later. She forwarded me an article titled The Overdiagnosis of Depression in Working-Age Men with a single text. Interesting read. Not saying anything, just thought you'd want to see it. I read the article. It cited one study from 2014. I deleted the message. Those were the only 2. I'm not listing them to build a case they're here, because they're the only reason I wasn't completely blindsided by what happened when I got home that Friday evening and reached up for the shelf. The bottle was on the shelf where it always was, but something about it was wrong. I picked it up before I understood why the weight was off. Too light in a way I registered before I registered anything else. I shook it once. No sound. I opened it and looked inside. Empty. I set it back on the shelf. I opened the cabinet above where I kept a backup supply from the last refill cycle. Nothing there. I checked the counter, the drawer below the shelf, the windowsill by the sink. Nothing. I picked the bottle back up and stood holding it. The kitchen was quiet in the ordinary way it always was at that hour. Late afternoon light through the window above the sink, the coffee maker light blinking green. Haley came out of the bedroom. She had on the gray sweatshirt she wore on Friday evenings, hands in the front pocket. She looked completely normal until she saw me standing at the shelf with the bottle in my hand, and then she didn't look surprised. Hey, she said. I was going to talk to you about that. About the fact that it's empty, I said. She came around the kitchen island. Slowly, the way someone moves when they think the pace of a conversation can control where it goes. Yancey, she said. Holding eye contact the whole time, I flushed your prescription antidepressants down the toilet. You don't need pills. You need to man up. I set the bottle down on the counter. Not hard. Carefully, the way you set something down when you are thinking about what comes next. I've been doing a lot of reading, she continued. There's real research on emotional blunting from SSRIs. Yancey, you have been so flat lately. I can't remember the last time you actually laughed at something. I thought the medication was part of the problem, not the solution. I thought if it was gone, you'd have to actually work through things instead of just. She stopped. I was trying to help you. That last part is the one that's going to divide the room, and I know it. She was not lying when she said it. She had read things she found convincing, and she had arrived at a conclusion that felt, to her, like love. That is the most accurate thing I can say about Haley Carver at this particular moment. She believed every word of it. I looked at her and said, did you know that stopping sertraline without tapering can cause seizures? Her expression shifted not all the way to understanding, but far enough in that direction that I could see she hadn't considered that specific fact before. There was a pause where she could have said something that changed the trajectory of everything that followed. She didn't. Yancey, that's not. I'm going to call my doctor, I said. I picked up my phone from the counter. She said my name twice more while I was dialing. I let it ring. Dr. Patricia Webb had been my psychiatrist for 5 years. She was the one who had worked through 3 different medications with me before we settled on sertraline, and the one who had been clearest, from the very beginning, about why consistency with this particular drug wasn't optional. When I called her that Friday night, I wasn't looking for support or strategy. I was calling because I had a medical problem that needed to be managed before it got worse. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I told her what had happened, no framing, just the facts in sequence. The empty bottle. When I had last taken a dose. What Haley had said. Doctor, Webb listened without interrupting. When I finished, there were a few seconds of silence. I need you to monitor yourself carefully over the next 48 hours, she said. Brain zaps, dizziness, nausea, any sudden mood shifts, you call me regardless of the time. I'm calling in an emergency refill tonight. Then she paused. Yancey, what she did isn't just harmful. It's a crime. I want you to know that I will document everything from this call forward. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed. I wasn't thinking about anything beyond the next 2 days, but something in what she had said, I will document everything from this call forward, settled into a different part of my mind and stayed there. The next 3 days were the kind where you spend a lot of time monitoring your own body for the wrong reasons. Some nausea on Saturday morning. A strange electrical sensation behind my eyes on Sunday afternoon that lasted about 20 minutes and then stopped. I kept the log Dr. Webb had asked for. Time, symptom, duration, severity on a scale of 1 to 10. On Monday, I went to work. I sat through a 2-hour project review, answered my emails, ate lunch at my desk. Nobody who looked at me that day would have seen anything unusual. That particular skill appearing fine was one I had been practicing for 5 years. The difference now was that the composure wasn't performance. I had a list in my head, and I was moving through it. I had screenshotted Haley's text from Friday afternoon, her asking whether I was bringing home pizza, no mention of what she was about to do. I had the forwarded article from 3 months earlier. Dr. Webb had confirmed she would contact Westbrook Elementary's HR directly with the medical documentation, something she said fell within her standing as treating physician. I had a call with the non-emergency police line scheduled for Wednesday morning. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of the withdrawal, because I was making a list. Wednesday was 11 days after the phone call with Dr. Webb. Westbrook Elementary sat at the corner of Dunning Avenue and Maple Street, a 2-story brick building with a green canvas awning over the main entrance and a flagpole in the center of the parking lot with a yellow ribbon on it that someone had tied there in February and never removed. The HR office was at the end of the main hallway, past the library, a corner room with glass panels frosted halfway up, so that anyone passing in the corridor could see the silhouettes of people inside but not the surface of the desk in front of them. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Haley Carver was standing in front of her 2nd grade class in room 204, 1 hallway and 1 set of fire doors away. She had a green marker in her hand. She had no idea what was happening at the other end of the building. Dr. Patricia Webb arrived at Westbrook Elementary at 2:05, 10 minutes before her scheduled meeting with Sandra Collins. She had taken off her lab coat and was wearing a navy blazer over a white blouse, and she carried a manila folder considerably thicker than it looked like it should be. She moved through the front entrance the way she moved through every room I had seen her in, not quickly, not slowly, with the particular economy of purpose that belongs to people who have been doing important things long enough that they no longer feel the need to signal it. The woman at the front desk looked up, and her eyes followed Dr. Webb across the length of the lobby before she remembered to say anything. The administrative assistant at the main desk, a young woman named Cooper, according to her lanyard, asked for identification and the purpose of the visit. Dr. Webb handed over her medical credentials without breaking stride, stated her name and her appointment with Sandra Collins in HR, and waited while Cooper confirmed the schedule. Cooper made a note, opened the glass door to the inner hallway, and Dr. Webb walked through. Sandra Collins was already at her desk when Dr. Webb entered the HR office. The folder went on the table. They talked for 35 minutes. At 2:50, Collins picked up the desk phone and dialed room 204. Haley Carver appeared in the doorway 90 seconds later. She was still holding the green marker. Before she understood what she was walking into, She looked the way she always looked in professional settings, composed and brisk, carrying the particular ease of someone who manages 23 8-year-olds without incident and considers it a sufficient credential for any room. Her eyes went to Collins first, then moved across to the other person sitting at the table. The moment she identified Dr. Webb, something in her face stopped working the way it had been working. Not one expression changing into another, the whole signal cutting out at once, like a screen going dark mid-sentence. The green marker dropped from her fingers and hit the carpet. She didn't reach for it. She sat down in the chair across from Collins without being invited to. She sat down the way you sit down when sitting is the only remaining option. Collins spoke first. She stated the purpose of the meeting without preamble, then looked at Haley directly and asked, "Miss Carver, can you describe what happened with Mr. Adams's prescription on the evening of March 14th? Haley's hands were together in her lap. She looked at them for a moment. "I made a decision I believed was in his best interest," she said. "I was trying to help him. He had been struggling for a long time, and I thought if the medication wasn't available, he would." Collins said, "I need to stop you there. The reason Dr. Webb is here is to provide medical documentation of the impact of that decision. That documentation was also filed with law enforcement this morning." She slid a folder across the desk. "I need you to understand the nature of what we're discussing here." Haley looked at the folder without opening it. When Collins asked if she understood, Haley said, "I wasn't trying to hurt him." Collins said, "That's noted, Miss Carver. It doesn't change what the documentation shows." The room was quiet for a moment in a way that had nothing to do with the absence of sound. Dr. Webb set down her pen and let the silence sit for a moment. Collins did not fill it. Neither did Haley. A teacher moving through the hallway outside slowed as she passed the frosted glass, looked in for a moment at the shapes of 3 people on the other side, and kept walking. Dr. Webb opened her folder. She placed items on the table one at a time: the Friday night call notes, the documented withdrawal symptoms across 72 hours, the emergency prescription cost, the monitoring log. Then she reached in and removed one final page. It was a printed screenshot of Haley's own Instagram post from the week before the incident, the title visible at the top, "How to Support Your Partner's Mental Health Journey." Below it, formatted as the caption had been, a single line: "Real support means showing up for someone, not deciding what they need." Collins looked at the printout. Then she looked at Haley. Haley looked at her own words on the paper in front of her for a long time. She wasn't reading, she already knew exactly what it said. She was looking at it the way you look at something produced by a version of yourself you thought was still operating correctly, except that version was sitting right here, in this chair, with the green marker on the floor between her feet. "I didn't think it would," she started, and stopped. She didn't finish. She looked down at the desk. The marker was still on the carpet. "Dr. Webb called me at 4:30. She confirmed that the documentation had been received and acknowledged by the HR department, and that the school would be initiating an internal review under standard policy. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was fine. She said she believed me. I sat in the work parking lot for about 15 minutes after we hung up. I didn't call anyone, didn't send any messages. I sat with that for a while." Detective Ray Foster had reached out 2 days earlier to confirm that the documentation from Dr. Webb matched what I had submitted with my initial report. He told me I'd hear back within 2 weeks regarding next steps. I had put a date on my calendar and stopped checking my phone for updates. I drove home and made dinner. I ate at the counter with the window cracked because the evening had finally gotten warm enough for that, and I was going over the details of a project review I had the following morning. That was still what I was thinking about when I turned off the light. I noticed that, then I turned off the light and went to sleep. Haley started texting me that same evening. The first message came through at 7:12. "I need you to understand that I did this because I love you. I never wanted to hurt you." 20 minutes later, "You going to HR was so far beyond anything I could have expected from you. I thought you were better than this." Then, a little before 10, a longer one, 3 paragraphs about how I had weaponized our relationship to destroy her career, how I had taken something private and made it into an attack. I screenshotted each message and forwarded them to Detective Foster. 2 days after the meeting, she posted an Instagram story. No names, nothing specific, just specific enough for anyone who knew us. "Sometimes the people you love most become strangers when you try to challenge the systems they depend on." It stayed up for about 2 hours. A follower named Kayla had already screenshotted it and sent it to several mutual acquaintances before it came down. The post generated questions in her DMs. Haley replied to several of them with the language of someone managing a situation. She had made a difficult call, and someone important in her life hadn't understood it. Her followers pressed for details. She went quiet. Then she called my mother. Carol Adams told me about it that same evening. Haley had reached out to explain that things were being misrepresented and that she hoped Carol would help me see the situation more clearly. My mother listened to everything, thanked her politely, and called me the moment they hung up. She called me, "Honey," my mother said. "I just wanted you to know." After that, there was nothing left to interpret. Haley wasn't fighting for the relationship. She was fighting for her version of events. 3 weeks after the Westbrook meeting, I got a text from Tom Bradley. Tom was someone I had met through work about 4 years earlier. We had been in the same project management training and stayed in loose contact since. He had started following Haley's Instagram because he knew her through me, the way people add peripheral connections to their feeds without much thought. His text said, "Hey, I don't know if you've seen this. Thought you should." There was a link. The link went to a thread in r/Amethyst on Reddit. Someone had posted a story, no names, no identifying details, but the shape of it was immediately recognizable. A wellness content creator who had flushed her partner's prescription antidepressants and told him to man up. The original post asked whether the partner was wrong to file a police report. The thread had 2,300 comments. I scrolled through the top responses. About halfway down, a user named Qley Mike had done something methodical. They had pulled a full archive of posts from what was clearly Haley's account and compiled them into a single comment. Post after post about mental health awareness, about reducing medication stigma, about showing up fully for the people you love. Each one timestamped, each one placed directly beside the account in the original post. The comment had over 400 upvotes. The replies were still accumulating. I read through it once. I set my phone down on the coffee table. Outside it was raining, the kind of light, steady rain that doesn't do anything dramatic. It just makes everything a little darker and a little quieter than it was before. I picked the phone back up, texted Tom, "I've seen it, thanks for sending," and put it face down. Then I went to make coffee. There was one evening about 5 weeks out when I came home from work and realized I was genuinely hungry, the kind where your body reminds you it has preferences, not the kind you talk yourself into. I had leftover pasta in the refrigerator and nothing pressing to do, and I stood at the counter eating it cold out of the container because I couldn't be bothered to heat it up, listening to a playlist I hadn't touched in about 3 years. At 8 o'clock, my phone alarm went off. I put the fork down, took my sertraline with a glass of water, and went back to the pasta. The pill bottle was in the kitchen drawer. Now I had moved it the first week after coming home, just to have something in a different place than it had been. The drawer worked fine. The alarm still worked. The pasta was cold and a little too salty, and I ate the whole container and put it in the recycling and didn't think much about any of it. Haley Carver had built everything she publicly called herself on the idea that she understood how to take care of people. Tom Bradley called me on a Tuesday evening, about a month after he had sent the Reddit link. He asked if I had a few minutes. I said yes. He had the voice of someone who has been watching something unfold at a certain distance and has decided that passing it along is the right thing to do. He told me that Haley's Instagram was gone. Not on private, not on hiatus, deleted outright. The links from external posts that had pointed back to her blog now led to blank pages. He knew because his 12-year-old had clicked one for a school project that week and asked him why the page didn't exist. Tom said he had tried the link himself just to be sure, and he sat there for a moment looking at the empty screen before he closed the tab. He also told me he had dropped his daughter off at Westbrook Elementary for a school event the previous week. While he waited in the front hallway, he picked up the activities newsletter from the table by the entrance. He remembered that Haley had mentioned at a party about 2 years ago that she was heading the school's mental health awareness committee. He looked for her name in the listings. It wasn't there. "I ran into her at the supermarket last Thursday," Tom said. He went quiet for a moment. "We talked for a minute. She said something I thought you'd want to hear." He paused again. "She said, I just wanted him to be stronger. I didn't think any of this would happen." I was standing in my kitchen when he told me that. The window over the sink was dark by then, and the parking lot outside was lit in that orange-white glow that makes everything look very still. The 8 o'clock alarm hadn't gone off yet. I was holding the phone with both hands without realizing it. I didn't feel anything I expected to feel. Tom kept talking. He asked how I was doing, whether work had leveled out, whether I'd been getting outside more now that the weather had changed. I answered his questions. We talked for a few more minutes about things that had nothing to do with any of this. When we hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a little while without doing anything in particular, and then I put the kettle on. I had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Webb 6 weeks after the Westbrook meeting. She made a minor adjustment to my dose, a recalibration she said she had been considering for a while, and now had a clean baseline to work from. I drove home afterward with the windows down because it had finally gotten warm enough for that. Sometime around then, I deleted Haley's number from my phone. I noticed it was still there one morning when I was looking for something else, and I deleted it the same way I would delete any contact. I no longer had a reason to keep no pause, no particular feeling about it, just the recognition that there was no point in it being there anymore. The pill bottle is in the kitchen drawer. The alarm goes off at 8 o'clock every night. I take the pill, pour a glass of water, and move on to whatever comes next. I don't need anyone to believe I'm sick to know that I'm getting better.